the rim. Garnett on the slam. Oh, here's a Curry way downtown. Oh, what a shot!
The year is 2019 and it's the summer. You've just woken up to learn that the Clippers have unexpectedly hauled both PG and Kawhi through trade and free agency in one fell swoop overnight. Aside from the fact that these are two of the best players and defenders in the league, this is particularly significant because of location. They reside right across the hall from yet another superstar duo that just recently materialized. It's set, as the league finally gets to dabble into one of its untapped storylines, the Battle of LA. However, this was not the first time we tried and failed to make this happen. Rewind the clock to offseason 2011. The Lakers are just a few months removed from having their 3-year run atop the West violently ended by the eventual champion Dallas Mavericks. Although they'd been favored to go to a 4th straight finals most of that year, the wheels had clearly come off in the sweep. Meanwhile, Kobe and Gasol were starting to age, back when the Lakers front office had a much quicker and smarter trigger finger. Rather than wait around to see the duo waste its last few good years away, they made a trade for disgruntled superstar point guard Chris Paul. Now, I've got an entire video on why this trade went down, and no, it was not because the league can just veto any trade that it wants. In any case, you can watch it, not gonna explain it all here. After the NBA, who owned the Hornets at the time, decided that package wasn't good enough, they went a different route and shipped Paul across the hall to the Clippers. Negatives? We'd never get to see Kobe and CP3 compete together, which I don't think most of us who lived through this ever got over. Positives? They'd immediately set up a rivalry for the ages. Paul fit like a hand in glove on this Clippers roster next to high-flying, upcoming superstar Blake Griffin. Even if they didn't somehow end up contending, they'd more than likely end up in an epic playoff scrum with the Lakers, who were very much still in play. And at the worst, we'd get some crazy regular season moments between the two. That we did get, but the trade falling through for the Lakers was the beginning of their downfall. For one, players involved in the trade like Gasol and Odom found themselves hurt and confused, feeling unwanted by a franchise they'd helped bring so much success to. For Odom, this was too much to bear, and he was eventually shipped off to what was basically the end of his career. That was unfortunate because he was a huge part of the run they had over the years, and if that hadn't made the roster worse on its own, they failed to improve a roster they clearly no longer believed in through meaningful ways. Thus, neither team advanced far enough in that year's playoffs to meet in what would have been their first postseason duel ever, both losing in the second round to the eventual conference finals teams. Want to know what makes this all worse by the end? In 2012, we missed this battle by literally one game. The Lakers finished 3rd at 41-25, and the Clippers 5th at 40-26. If the Lakers, who were dead tied with Memphis, had lost a single game more, they would have swapped places, and the Clippers and Lakers would have battled in the first round, mere months after that trade controversy surrounding CP3. A beautiful and fun story had been fumbled, but it was of no consequence because surely these two would catch up with each other eventually. As a matter of fact, the Lakers wasted no time in righting the wrongs of the past offseason, now acquiring both Steve Nash and disgruntled superstar center Dwight Howard. The long-term plan at that time had always been to pair Dwight and CP3 with Kobe, then let those two carry the franchise as he aged. But this was almost sweeter, as on paper and on the front of magazines, they now had one of the, if not the most stacked team of all time. Ron Artest was infamously quoted saying that they'd aimed to go 73-9, a record nobody even thought possible at the time. In any case, the purple and gold had all but been penciled into the NBA Finals against the Miami Heat, whilst the Clippers made some improvements of their own. The Battle of LA wasn't so much the story anymore, given that it looked lopsided, but it was still conceivable that we'd see it materialize, and it'd be fun nonetheless. Except, well, this is also a video I've already made in detail. This Lakers squad barely got any time to play with each other due to injury, and it derailed the entirety of their season. And if there was any hope they could get healthy at the last minute and make a run in the playoffs, Kobe Bryant tore his Achilles. This not only ended the 2013 season, it effectively ended his career. We would again miss the Battle of LA, Steve Nash was never even close to himself again as he too suffered serious injuries, and Dwight Howard thought better of his career and left to find a healthy shooting guard that still had time to compete. This all while the Clippers had won nearly 60 games and were clearly a contending level roster when healthy, although that would immediately become their problem as well. The injury woes led them to bow out in the first round, so even in a perfect world, this matchup was pretty much doomed. While the Clippers would continue to try and scale the mountain, Kobe's injuries and age basically ended any meaningful basketball for them through his last 3 seasons, and there was no clear direction after him for another 2 years. Combine that with the fact that the Clippers' Chris Paul run got derailed, and the Battle of LA went dormant for 6 consecutive years. That does include 2019, where despite signing LeBron James, neither team was in true contention. This brings us to the morning we arose in that 2019 offseason, learning that the chance was not only back, but completely unavoidable. There was simply no way LeBron and AD wouldn't be a top team, but it was hard to envision PG and Kawhi failing either. This was particularly exciting because by this point, LeBron had some major history with both of them in the playoffs. Yet it was Kawhi of all people to spice things up with a commercial that claimed it was his city. This in an economy where LeBron James existed. However, at the time, Kawhi was being touted as the league's best player, fresh off of one of the most dominant playoff runs we'd ever seen. The anticipation was palpable from the start. What would a playoff matchup be like where both teams were expected to make the finals and had to play it out in an arena where the fans would have to pick a side? We couldn't even imagine it. With the two teams having the most enticing rosters in the West, the only path to the finals was thought to lie through each other. Yet, the very first game of the reopening of this rivalry pretty much set the tone, as it was hard to truly judge without Paul George playing. We ignored the signs though, with good reason. The next two matchups on Christmas Day and in March were the only advertisements we paid attention to. This was going to be epic. Then, COVID strikes. To this day, I will tell you that I fully believe if we got to play this out in actual arenas, we would have gotten our Western Conference prophecy with these teams. They were the first and second seed, they were pretty much healthy as they can be. It was made. Unfortunately, all we got was one more beautiful poster of what the series could be with their last meeting inside the bubble. I was so sure this matchup would ensue, I made a hype video about what was to come. What actually came was one of the biggest meltdowns in NBA history. With the Lakers awaiting the victor in the third round, the Clippers would go on to blow a 3-1 lead to the Nuggets after basically having eliminated them in Game 5. The Dream, once again, successfully evaded the league. But it was fine because this couldn't happen twice, right? We were willing to shoot them bail, saying it was a weird year and that the bubble environment changed outcomes. In a normal world, we'd surely get this eventually, just like we would have in the old days. And yeah, in 2021, we totally could have. The world was returning to normal, and both teams were having successful runs until the injury bug, and now we know Father Time, came for the Lakers. A wounded champion, they did their absolute best to keep the wheels on long enough to make a playoff run, and at a point, they were even up 2-1 on the eventual Western champion Phoenix Suns. However, with the official start to a recurring theme, an injury to Anthony Davis would all but seal their fate. Combined with the fact that LeBron never truly had his ankle in order, it was all too much to overcome. Pouring salt in the wound was the fact that the Suns quite easily advanced to play the Clippers in the conference finals the same way the Lakers likely would have. But in what we can now call typical LA fashion, Kawhi had torn his ACL in the second round against the Utah Jazz, meaning that even if we had lucked into the battle, it probably wouldn't have been anywhere near full strength for either side. The implication of the ACL tear happening so late in the season though meant that 2022 was likely cooked for the Clippers as well. Conventional wisdom says superstar has tragic injury in the playoffs, he typically doesn't play next season either. That all but wraps up the 2022 season, if you don't want to discuss the fact that the Lakers front office had the same quick trigger finger they'd had 11 years earlier, just maybe not as smart. With time running out on the LeBron and AD era, and super teams apparently making a comeback, they broke up a lot of their winning roster to bring in Russell Westbrook, a fatal mistake for the upcoming year. Not only was he terrible in his role, but he was very expensive, and the Lakers again fought injury after injury. Essentially, both teams had no meaningful shot at anything, and neither would go on to make the playoffs. That takes us to present day, where as I type this, the Clippers have just defeated the Lakers for the second time this season, and added to the record where they pretty much owned them throughout this era, in the regular season. With the Lakers having one of the worst constructed rosters in the league, and the Clippers left with no answers about when they'll see a healthy Kawhi back on the floor from his mid-2021 ACL injury, I think it's fair to say we've missed it again. For it to materialize in what appears to be the waning years, the Lakers would have to make a Hail Mary trade basically tomorrow that actually pans out, and the Clippers would have to stay healthy. I'm not sure if either of those are likely to happen, and if you've been watching this year, LeBron definitely does not look the same anymore. We knew it was eventually coming, and I think it's probably here. Even if we got it next year for some reason, it feels as if it's lost all of its weight. And you know what? Maybe it's just not meant to be. Maybe there's a reason they've never met a single time in the playoffs. Maybe there's a reason they're never contending at the same time. And when they are, maybe there's a reason, despite the most perfect of circumstances, it just never comes to fruition. Maybe one day we'll get it, but so far, just like every other year, today is not that day.